as we welcome you on into another episode of Red is the New Orange. And now Red is officially the new orange because Adrian Autry last night grabbed his first win of his Syracuse tenure as the Orange took down New Hampshire in the 2023-2024 season opener. What's going on, everybody? Glad to have you on board. As always, alongside Ian Unsworth, I'm Johnny Gadamowitz. Make sure you give us a follow on Twitter. We're at F68_Qs, part of the Field of 68 Media Network. Make sure you give their channel a follow as well. All sorts of daily content across the college basketball realm. But Ian, as far as Syracuse is concerned, not a perfect win, but a win all the same as the Orange start the season 1-0, take down New Hampshire. I was boots on the ground in the Dome last night for a game that was really a long time coming, I think, for a lot of Orange fans. And you figure, okay, Monday night, non-conference opponent, not necessarily the most hype in the world. There was some buzz in the building, and thankfully Syracuse lived up to that buzz, at least as far as night one was concerned.
When you look back at the end of the year, all you're going to see is 1-0. You're going to see the final score. Syracuse won by 11. It's a non-conference game. That's what should happen. No one's going to care about what happened inside that 40-minute sandwich and the highs and the lows and everything in between. It's just a win. And we can all acknowledge there are more kinks to work out. We can all acknowledge it was not a perfect game by any stretch. But it's just getting over that hump. That's all that Red Autry needed to do in game one. Get that ceremonial basketball with all his team's names signed on it. John Wild Hack hands it to him post-game. Everyone gets a water shower. Just build some positive momentum. That's all you needed.
Well, some locker room celebrations regardless. We will do our best now to dissect those 40 minutes, which again, as you just so eloquently put, Ian, end of the year, probably not going to matter a ton when you look back on night number one. But as far as night number one was concerned, you mentioned it, not perfect. But I think signs of growth and some signs that you can sort of build off of. And one of those signs, at least for me, watching that game, was just seeing how much this team really can spread the wealth offensively. Yes, Judah Mintz is going to be the headliner. Yes, J.J. Starling comes over from Notre Dame with plenty of pedigree and plenty of capability as far as scoring is concerned. But at the end of the day, this team has options. And that was really on full display last night, right? The news comes down in the afternoon that Benny Williams is a no-go, Malik Brown is all good to go, and you start to wonder, okay, how is this going to affect things? We put out on our Twitter, hey, keep an eye out for our boy, Justin Taylor, who we've been talking plenty of preseason. But you look up and down as far as the numbers are concerned last night, and even just beyond the numbers, just watching the game from a feel standpoint, a lot of guys looked good. A lot of guys felt comfortable. I mean, you had 5 guys in double figures. And one of them, someone who really impressed me, who I'll hone in on here for a sec, Quadir Copeland. And, you know, we were having some preseason conversation, Ian, about, oh boy, what's going to happen if Quadir Copeland, who is a guard, is going to have to play some bully ball down low? Saw a little bit of it last night. Wasn't the prettiest thing in the world, but that's besides the point. From an offensive standpoint, Copeland coming in off the bench and providing ample minutes. You know, I made that Symir Torrance comparison last time out. I think he has the potential to sort of blow beyond that role in a sense, right? We didn't necessarily see Symir come in and score double figures on a consistent basis. That's not to say I think Quadir will, but knowing he has that in his back pocket, not to mention he got after it on the glass too. For a guard that he is, double-digit rebounds, you take that and you run with it. Was really impressed with the play in number 24 last night.
The Symir Torrance had double digits for the Binghamton Bearcats in their loss to Northwestern, and he was rather efficient from the field. So let's put that out there. But Quadir is much different build-wise. I think that's what really helps. He looked so comfortable getting to the rack and then finishing, having the spatial awareness around the rim that you don't have as a freshman. Last year, when he got the ball, he'd go to the rack, he'd lose it, or he'd try to throw a fancy pass. There's more confidence this year. Even on those layups he missed, he stuck with them. He did what I call the Andre Drummond a couple of times, where you miss your own attempt, get the rebound, put it back up and in. That's why Andre Drummond averaged a double-double for a couple of years on the Pistons. And Quadir Copeland did the same thing last night.
Double
Pad the
double.
stats.
Drummond was averaging practically 20 and 20 at one point.
Yeah, because if you're missing your own shot,
Yes.
getting the you get my point.
Yes.
But Quadir looked so comfortable around the basket. He wasn't rushed. There was no, oh, this big guy's in my face. And also, New Hampshire's tallest player out there was 6'6", 6'7". That certainly helps. But Quadir was aggressive, and he got to the hole, especially because this team had a bad three-point shooting night. That's huge.
This had the makings of a game, too. I mean, you watch those first couple minutes. It could have been one that really was over before it even got started.
Yeah.
New Hampshire hung around. And, the tail end to that first half, they really put the Orange defense in a tough spot. And even the second half, to their credit, they didn't go down without a fight. And I think a big reason why for that was Syracuse kind of struggled a little bit on the interior. We mentioned Copeland getting after it on the glass, but outside of that, wasn't really blown away by the play of Naheem McLeod. I think, Peter Carey came in off the bench and had a dunk on an alley-oop that got the crowd excited. But outside of that, I think the bigs left a lot to be desired last night. And that was evident in the rebounding battle, I guess. You're +6 on the glass, not the end of the world. But still, you figure, okay, going up against a team in New Hampshire, right? Not non-conference, not an ACC squad, a team that you really should kind of have your way with, particularly when it comes to that physicality battle, right? Just from a pure recruiting standpoint, you'd imagine that your guys are able to get after it on the boards a little more than the quality of what New Hampshire is going to bring to the table. But that left me with a little bit of a bitter taste in my mouth, Ian. I don't know if you feel the same. And that, look, at some point, we all know when you get to conference play, it's a battle, right? It's a dogfight. When you get into the dog days of the regular season, January, February, yes, teams that make shots are going to win ball games, but also teams that win the rebounding battle are going to win ball games too. And I worry a little bit, particularly if this Benny Williams thing, which we've said before, is anything larger than what it's been made out to be, where that leaves this team when it comes to getting dirty down low.
Two reasons Syracuse didn't rebound last night. Matchups. One, New Hampshire's biggest player is 6'6". Naheem McLeod can't stick with him. Clarence Daniels got his own, rightly so. We said it in our Friday podcast. He had 21 points. He was 8 of 17 from the field, but as a smaller school star, you have to take a lot of shots. And he got his own.
Points in only 21 minutes, too.
Yeah. He got his own. McLeod couldn't stick with him. And that's going to be an issue at times. McLeod played 2 minutes in the second half and then sat for the last 18.
Right.
It's not great when your advantage of size and strength doesn't overpower the smaller school advantage of speed and quickness. So you don't have the height. You don't have the 7'4" behemoth. That's one reason. Second reason, the switch to zone. Adrian Autry said post-game, thank God for the 2-3 zone. Did the zone win this game? Maybe, maybe not. Because there were times when it gave up just as many shots as the man-to-man, but New Hampshire got tired at the end, started missing, clanked some threes, and the air popped out of their balloon. I don't think the zone won them this game. Let's slow down there. But as we've seen over the past couple of years, in the zone, it's much harder to rebound. You're not assigned a person, you're just assigned a space. And when that ball isn't going your space, well, it's not your responsibility to get it. So you have one orange jersey, white jersey, trying to handle 3 navy jerseys. And when the ball's on the ground, it doesn't matter if you're 6'9" or 6'2".
And for as much, backcourt depth that we talk about on this team, I think that front court depth really is sort of lacking. And obviously, Naheem McLeod playing only 10 minutes is not a formula that at least I think is sustainable. As I just alluded to, at some point, you're going to need more out of the bigs. But on a night like last night, as you mentioned, Ian, there are certainly reasons why the numbers are what they are, and SU found a way to mitigate that nonetheless. We'll switch gears a little bit here and now focus on that backcourt that I just alluded to. Because for all the depth that they have and for all the different names and all the different skill sets that they bring to the table, one of those skill sets that was really kind of lacking last night was the three-point shot. Justin Taylor, the only player for the Orange last night that made multiple trifectas. And I think that's a problem. To a certain extent, this team's two best players in Judah Mintz and JJ Starling are both kind of those slasher type guards, right? And we saw that on full.
They're
Yeah,
non-shooters.
non-shooters. And we saw it on full display last night, right? There's something to be said for the ferocity with which Judah can get to the rim and draw contact and get to the line. And same can be said for JJ, maybe to a little bit of a lesser extent. But at the end of the day, we've seen it in past years, Ian. You've got to be able to win games that are shootouts, right? Sometimes if that's the kind of game that's going to unfold when you're going up against the Colgates of the world or the ACC teams of the world that are going to let it fly like Miami last year or any squad on any particular year, take your pick. You've got to be able to run with that.
State.
Right. And I worry about the ability for this team to run with those teams. I mean, purely from an analytics standpoint, right? It's not hard math. 3 points is more than 2, right? So when it comes to a contest where Syracuse is maybe not going to need to rely on that 3 ball because that's not their identity, but at least kind of have it in their back pocket as an option to shoot over defenders when the interior game isn't working, when you don't have much going in the mid-range. To be able to set screens for shooters on the outside and let it fly and just develop that confidence. And maybe we'll see it as the year goes on, right? After all, night number 1, you're not going to press the panic button. But definitely something that I think at least needs addressing moving forward.
When the offense started to grind to a halt, you saw guys taking threes. It wasn't the issue of Syracuse didn't take enough three-point shots. They took 21, but they only made 5. In prior years, we'd be saying Buddy Boeheim and Cole Swider should have taken at least 20 themselves combined. Why isn't Elijah Hughes getting off 13 threes? That's what Syracuse needs to win. But for this team, that's not the case. The three-pointers came when legs got tired, when they hit the wall, when the offensive sets kind of disappeared. And that's the problem. The three-pointers were not in rhythm, most of them at least, and they weren't coming from your best guys. I mean, Chris Bell, 1 for 5. That's not good. He hit 1 early on, then disappeared, as he tended to do last year. Not great.
Only 1 for Kyle Cuff as well.
Yeah, Cuff hit 1,
right?
Just kind of a flash in the pan.
Yeah.
And Starling and Mintz both took some bad ones.
Yeah.
Out of system, no real setup. Mintz dribbles to the right wing and says, you know what? Nothing's really happening. I'm going to take a 3.
And a lot of those looks drew some moans and groans from the SU crowd on hand as well. It was evident at a certain point that some of those looks were ugly ones. And any night where you go 5 for 21 from 3-point range in today's day and age of college basketball, I know it's not the NBA where everyone and their mother can shoot, but at the end of the day, you still want to see those percentages a little bit higher up.
It's all the Judah's hero ball happened a little bit in the second half.
Right.
And it's going to happen throughout this season. That's perfectly fine. It can't be 3-pointers, though. It has to be attacking the basket, as you mentioned. It has to be setting up his teammates after an aggressive dribble drive. It can't be, I've got the ball in my hands, so I'm going to do whatever I want. Johnny, you kind of gave me your good, bad, and ugly from game 1, so I'll do the same. So starting off with Justin Taylor. How about Justin Taylor? Because for most of the first half, after we tweeted about him at F68_Cuse, that's where you can find all of our podcast content and our well thought out, the vision from Johnny and I right now is we're pretty tapped in because we tweeted about Justin Taylor playing a bigger role with no Benny and with an offense that we didn't know what we were going to get. And in the second half, when New Hampshire came back, cut it to 7, cut it to 6, who was the guy that went on an 8-0 run? Who picked up a ball through a beautiful bounce pass that led to a fast break dunk? It was Justin Taylor. And last year, besides that Bryant game, you would have never thought that this dude would do more besides shoot free throws and maybe take some threes. But he showed a better bag. He had 6 rebounds, second most on the team. There were assists in there, blocks and steals. It was a complete Justin Taylor game.
No, he gave you a little bit of everything. And now I think you'd maybe have some Syracuse fans clamoring for him to take more than 9 shots. He made 5 of his 9 field goals on the night. It was an efficient night, took some high quality looks and made the most of them. 2 of those 5 from beyond the arc. And yeah, we've been singing his praises all preseason and for good reason. A couple of iffy turnovers. Did finish the night with 4, which was tied for the team high. But those are just growing pains that he'll continue to trim down on. I think for me, Ian, the big thing with Taylor is the consistency, right? Because as you mentioned, we saw those flashes last year, right? You mentioned the Bryant game. I think that's the one that comes to mind for a lot of Syracuse fans. Now it's about, okay, how do you build, right? How do you continue to piece strong performances together, even in a world perhaps where, let's say, Wednesday coming up against Canisius game 2, Benny Williams good to go. How does Taylor still continue to carve out his role, right? That is beyond just a spot up shooter, right? So I think for him, that's the big question. Where does he fit into the larger puzzle moving forward? And can he sort of maintain that role and maintain that success?
Right now, it might come at the expense of Chris Bell, but at least
I'm
given the
fine with
numbers
that.
game 1,
Right.
and given the fact that Taylor is more apt to put the ball on the floor, that's perfectly fine because you need secondary creators behind Mintz and Starling to make the offense really flow.
Totally.
And the offense flowed in the first 10 minutes, partially because of defense, partially because New Hampshire was sloppy with the ball, and partially because Syracuse really had it in its mind to play fast and move the ball. And the cool thing, coming out of a break, the ESPN broadcast showed Autry's pregame speech, like ESPN has gotten into the habit of with all these football coaches. There was nothing inflammatory in there, but there was a whiteboard behind Red Autry with a bunch of defensive keys, and then about 6 or 7 different half-court diagrams with plays and sets. Those were executed extremely well in the first half, to the point at which about halfway through, Syracuse was on pace to score 120. And then it all fell apart. I think guys hit a wall at the end of the first half. What did you see that, Johnny, being there?
Yeah, a little bit. It certainly looked that way. And look, sometimes all it takes is for a couple of shots not to fall, and then for whatever reason you can't take the lid off the basket. I also credit the New Hampshire defense a little bit too,
Yeah.
because I think they were shell shocked coming out to start that contest. Right when Syracuse puts up, what was it? I think they hit the 25 mark by like 5 minutes in, something like
I
that.
think so. What I have written down, and I know it's accurate, is that Clarence Daniels was the only New Hampshire player to score until the 9-minute mark of the first half.
Yeah,
They had 6 turnovers in 7 minutes and 9 points until like the 7-minute mark of the first half.
They were stuck on 6 for a really long time. I don't have the exact numbers for you, but I remember looking over at the scoreboard and New Hampshire was on 6 for what felt like north of 3 or 4 minutes of gameplay.
Oh, it was much more than that.
Yeah, but that's besides the point. The larger point I'm trying to make here is that I think this New Hampshire defense coming out of the gate didn't really know what they were getting themselves into, right? Syracuse was running these sets. They were having success. They were getting different guys the ball. New Hampshire had to cover so many different options, right? It wasn't like they could just key in on one guy like Syracuse tried to do from a Daniels standpoint. But after those first 10 minutes, they just appeared to be a step quicker, a bit more sharper, getting in the passing lanes, doing their best to try to disrupt the flow that Syracuse had developed. And to their credit, they did. I think it was a little bit of both. I think it was Syracuse's offense stalling out. And as you mentioned, Ian, guys kind of just hitting a wall, while also, New Hampshire was doing their best to make those adjustments and make those changes on the fly mid-game. And, for better or worse, it worked. Obviously, not enough for them to claw their all the way back into the game, but at least to slow down the Syracuse momentum a little bit and keep it a game moving into the second half.
When the philosophy is push, 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 tempo, 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 that's what guys revert to. Not necessarily, we're tired, let's slow down and try to run something offensively.
Right.
New Hampshire started dropping guys off the offensive boards. They started having 3-4 back in transition so that Syracuse couldn't push ahead off a miss, couldn't get that 2-on-1 dunk that they got
Correct.
a couple times in the first half. And so I remember one play pretty vividly. Quadir Copeland gets a rebound, drives down the floor. It's 1-on-3, and he throws it away. Mintz was on the wing, and Quadir chucks it into the second row of the dome stands. That's the kind of thing that shows you Syracuse is a little tired. They're mentally a little frayed, and they're not used to playing this kind of pace of basketball. That was the bad, per se. The ugly, if we want to go there, it's just that every once in a while you saw a flash of last year. Would you agree? A flash of...
Elaborate on that. How so?
Just a flash of lackadaisical defense. They went with like a 1-3-1 trap or something like that for one possession. New Hampshire dribbled through it like a rat going through a maze. No problem. And, you know, you see the turnovers, and then the second half, offense turns into let's stand around and look at Judah. Right. And I don't blame that on Red Autry. I don't think that's his fault.
No,
he was very proactive in coaching and making adjustments and changes and yanking your big guy off the floor. He was trying to be as on the ball as possible. But these players went through a full season, especially at the end, which turned into a bad losing season where it's easy to develop bad habits. And when things start sliding, sometimes you revert to those.
Yeah, especially when you look at the roster makeup of this team, and there are so many returners.
Still young, too.
Still young, and so many returners from last year who had that sort of defensive mindset really instilled in their brains. What I question is, you know, okay, if they're going to be this fast-paced, high-flying type team that we saw in the first half that ultimately did run out of gas a little bit towards the end of the first half, and even in the second half as well, Ian, when you mentioned it was a bit more stagnant, how does that hold up, right? Like there's got to be a fine line where over the course of the entirety of the regular season, you can't burn out like that.
I just thought of the Cuse women's basketball team under Von Reed that tried to press with like 6 players. And
how did that work?
They lost every single ACC game in the fourth quarter.
Right. So some of it's stamina, some of it is about just, you know, getting into the thick of things and getting used to playing 40 competitive minutes of basketball twice a week, right? Which this team has not had to do. Not only have they not had to do it yet, they haven't had to do it yet together, right? With this team. This is a new team. We mentioned those returners, but obviously it's very different philosophically than what we've seen. So time will tell. And we're excited to monitor it, right? That's why we're here doing what we do, breaking it down. But it will be very interesting, particularly, and you know, I know we spent some time talking about this in our preseason podcast, Ian, too. They're going to get tested right away when you go down to Maui and you get some of these cream of the crop type programs. And I think, you know, those will be good indicators to us as to, okay, what can we expect in January? What can we expect in February? Can this team, do they have what it takes to play a full 40 and not run out of gas? And that's an answer that we're not going to know until we see.
You've got an NCAA tournament team in a week. Colgate is the best mid-major team, I think, in the Northeast right now.
And it's a revenge game at that, from a Syracuse standpoint, right? You think about Matt Langle's crew coming in, taking care of business each of the last 2 years.
Yeah, they play fast. They shoot the lights out.
As far as what's next, though, game before Colgate, that would be Canisius. We mentioned it earlier. Coming up this week, Wednesday night, another home contest for the Cuse. Canisius squad that brings back a lot from a year ago. That's maybe the positive for them. The negative is that squad from a year ago wasn't particularly very good. Sub 500, bounced in the first round of the MAC tournament. Lost to, I believe it was Mount St. Mary's in overtime last year in round
Yeah, they played
one.
Mount St. Mary's close.
Right. But Ian, as we were sort of discussing before we hopped on the air here, a little comparable to New Hampshire in that maybe not quite a one-trick pony, but if you key in on one guy and kind of shut him down, then that's going to make things difficult for the Golden Griffins.
Yeah, Taj Stavesky is their dude. And the difference between he and Clarence Daniels is while Daniels is a Greek god who has 0% body fat,
Giannis
Stavesky is
Jr.
he's a 6-foot point guard who came off the bench last year. He had 21 games in double figures. The guy can fill it up. But it's much easier to stop a 6-foot point guard than it is a 6'6" small ball center who's a total mismatch. Canisius is also small. All these mid-major teams, Syracuse will play, maybe besides Colgate, will be pretty small. So that's something Coach Autry and the crew will have to deal with. But this is a case of Syracuse can't beat itself. If Syracuse plays a full 40 minutes of basketball, this shouldn't be a problem. And honestly, maybe they win by a wider margin than 11.
And it does bear mentioning as well that for the Golden Griffins, this will be tomorrow night, Wednesday night, their season opener, right? That they have not played a game yet outside of exhibitions. So season opener, going to the Dome, obviously the nerves going to be there for those guys. You would think advantage Syracuse, but time will tell. That's coming up Wednesday night, tomorrow night in the 3-1-5 as Adrian, Autry and company try to make it 2-0 to start the 2023-2024 campaign. That'll just about do it for this edition of Red is the New Orange. The Orange 1-0 with Ian Unsworth. I'm Johnny Gadamowitz. Make sure you check us out on Twitter at F68_Qs. Also, go give a follow to @thefield of68. They've got daily college hoops content, whether it's your team specifically.
Gotta watch After Dark.
After Dark, posted every night. It's a lot of fun. So we highly recommend you go give their channel a look as well. But with Ian, I'm Johnny saying so long. We'll catch you next time. Enjoy the game Wednesday night.